Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of AAC in the Cloud. We will turn the time over to our presenter for today's presentation.
Thank you. So I have a question for y'all. Have you ever shown up to work with a student or a client only to discover that their AAC device wasn't charged, still in their backpack, or not where they are currently? Well, this has happened too often for me. I was frustrated and I didn't know how to get this to change. So I was doing some research for one of my kiddos and found an example of an AAC roles chart. I was like, how did I not think of this earlier? So my name is Shannon Archer, and I have been a speech language pathologist for 14 plus years. I'm passionate about supporting our students, clients, families, and educators help kids talk back no matter how they find their voice. So to get some of the paperwork out of the way, or red tape, so to say, I am a speech language pathologist and I work for Coronado Unified School District. I'm an assistive technology and AAC specialist for the district. I'm owner of A Gift of Speech, a private practice, and I'm founder of the TalkBack team for AAC. I also blog and I create activities for Teachers Pay Teachers. I always feel that this is important at the beginning of a presentation to let y'all know that no Mr. Potato Heads were damaged, nor were Play-Doh colors mixed during therapy sessions. Typically, if they are, then I have to go run and get new Play-Doh. So I truly believe that our team members want to support their AAC user. But as all of us, we're often overworked. We have so many things to keep track of. Some of us have training with AAC, but many don't have much training with AAC. Or maybe they do have some training or experience and it is in older techniques, or they're just getting stuck and they're really not sure what to do next. So when I saw an AAC roles chart, I was like, this is brilliant. It was one of those moments where I was like, why did I not do this earlier? So I created this AAC roles chart in order to help support my team so that we could make sure that a student's AAC system is with them, is ready to go at all times. So this is an example of an AAC roles chart. Now, what you need for your team might look a little different. And there's some other great examples that you can find online. And in the materials, there's a couple examples of roles chart for you. And if you didn't get that, you can feel free to email me and I'll be happy to send you copies of this. So when I created this, I looked at a school day and I was trying to make this as robust as possible, but also as simple as possible. So I broke the school day up into 3 sections: morning, kind of like when an individual arrives at school, and then I have kind of across the day or mid part of the day, and then the end of the day. Now, I encourage you to, if you're using a roles chart, to change this up to meet the needs of your students, your clients, your own child. Now, I've kind of left a blank in there, but you can always, if you have a request, let me know, because I'm always looking to see how I can update and make this as appropriate to the individuals and to the teams as possible. So let's take a look at the different parts of the day and different responsibilities. So in the morning, this is who is taking the programmer device out of the backpack. Okay, this seems so simple, but who has not gone to work with a kiddo only to discover that the device is still in their backpack at 2 p.m.? Might have happened a couple times to me. The next thing is, kind of that across the day. Who's going to make sure that it goes with the student? Now, this could be one person, it could be multiple people. Just depends on the student. And depending on whether your your kiddo is in an elementary setting, middle school, or high school, the times during the day may look a little bit different, just depending on how your school setting is set up. So in a couple of my schools, our kiddos spent approximately about 75% of their day in their general classes and doing various activities with their general education peers. So this means it's super important to make sure that their device goes with them from place to place. And honestly, we were having a lot of issues with this because nobody was sure who was supposed to make sure the device was with the individual. If an individual went from one room to another, who made sure that it went from that room, and so forth. So having someone be in charge of this makes a huge difference. Or like I said, it might be multiple people. Some of my kiddos will have a specific instructional assistant that's working with them, maybe in the morning, maybe in the afternoon. So then it's a little bit easier to kind of make that interchange. But some of my kiddos don't have one specific person. So that's where it's important to just kind of make sure we know who is making sure that device is going with them throughout the day. Now, the next part that I delineate is at the end of the day. We want to make sure that device goes back in the backpack because there's nothing worse than a kiddo getting home and their device is still at school. And then they have no way to communicate using their device when they're at home if their school system is their primarily system. And then if it is their own system that they're bringing to and from, we do not want to mess that up. I've had multiple times, I have had the opportunity to take it home to make sure that the kiddo had their device. So it seems simple, but having somebody in charge of making sure that it goes home or that it's placed on a charger. Now, on this chart, you'll see there's kind of two columns as well, or three columns. The middle column is just to delineate the positions, and the right column is just the name of individual or individuals that are in charge of that time, that situation. The middle part is your device maintenance. So who is in charge of charging? Okay, now that pun was intended because this can be overlooked. I know that y'all are probably, I know that I am not alone in showing up, getting ready for a group, have some awesome things planned, and find out one of my students' device is low on charge, and then it dies in the middle of an activity. So, making sure that someone knows where the charger is, or maybe making sure we have a cord so that it can be charged while they're doing an activity. So making sure that there's somebody in charge of charging. The next is if there's a problem, who's going to contact the AT/AAC specialist or your district IT if there are problems with a device? Then we want to make sure there's someone who is going to back up the vocabulary. This is super important as iPads and pools or being dropped down a flight of stairs don't go well together. So keeping a vocab backup is really important. Now, some of the programs are set up so that you can set up a specific system or setting for updating. I know a lot of mine, I have them set up to automatically update, but it just depends on which program you're using. And I'll tell you, sometimes things can get toggled off. So I just always make sure that there's somebody who is doing that. And I'm letting you know this from personal experience of an interaction one of my students' iPad had with a fish pond. It didn't go over swimmingly. Yeah, I'm going to keep my day job. I know my jokes are a little lacking, but that's okay. And then the bottom part is programming and modifications. Who programs and updates vocabulary? I like to make sure we specify this so we don't have random and unexpected changes to vocabulary. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in and things look very different from the way they were set up. And, this can cause issues with a student's access to vocabulary and the internal structure. I think a lot of times what happens is team members are like, oh, we want to make sure they have this word because we're working on this book, but they may not know that that word is already within a category or a folder. So every district, has a little bit different setup with that. I'll admit that I started putting passwords on vocabulary so that only certain people knew how to change. And I hated doing that, but sometimes we have so many people that this device is passing through, and some people, may not know or understand why we're not just going to add this vocabulary. So just, making sure that you have someone who is in charge of that. And making sure that they are backing up the vocabulary. And then updating the system. Now, sometimes this is just the way that your IT has things set up, whether it automatically updates the program itself, the application, or the device. But that could be the person in charge is the case manager, and it could be that they're just in charge of making sure that it gets updated. So the bottom section is really, some of those, the programming, updating the vocabulary, and identifies and tracks vocabulary changes. Most of the program and modifications typically is either done by myself, the campus SLP, or the case manager. I try to really make sure that this is a smaller group of individuals, so that we don't, like I said, have different things changed unexpectedly. Another important thing I didn't do early enough is to track changes. Now, some applications have programs that will track vocabulary usage and such, but I also realized that we were making changes, maybe opening up some vocabulary that hadn't been done before, and we started using just a Google spreadsheet, nothing fancy, just so we could kind of keep track of that. That helped us to see, what are some vocabulary that we want to make sure that there's more access to, and, and what is working for the individual. So who do I create this with? So I typically create this with the case manager. We talk about who would be the best for each role. Then we share the chart with the team. We make sure that it is somewhere that the team can refer to and has access to. So I go over the chart with the team. Now, there's not always the possibility for me to sit down, or for the case manager or the campus SLP to sit down with everybody in a group. We know our schedules, trying to get 5 people into a room at a time is not easy. It's like trying to, schedule IEP meetings or ARD meetings with 5 to 7 people. It's challenging. It's like Tetris. But I want to make sure that the individuals who do have the roles, that they understand what are the expectations, and just to make sure if there's any questions or concerns. And then I make sure I place the chart in a place to help remind the team. Honestly, I need this as well. It helps me if I'm going into a classroom and I want to check on, hey, are there any updates or changes? I can go look and see, who I'm going to talk to, or, hey, it's the afternoon and there's been some issues with it not being charged. Then I can go and talk to that person and say, hey, are there some concerns or anything I can help you with? So I like to put it in a prominent location in a space or classroom that I know the individuals are going to see. The other thing I like to do is I like to talk with the family about the school chart that we're using and kind of talk to them about what's going on. Now, I don't always do it, just really depends on, I don't always share ones with all the specific names, but I might share the chart just so they know what we're doing and tracking. I also try to take the time to, to share. The reason why I take the time to share this with parents is I want them to see what we are doing and how we are ensuring the child's talker is being incorporated into their day-to-day school activities. It's a way of saying, hey, we're doing this. This is how we're tracking it. This is how we're making sure that things are happening. This is also a great opportunity to chat with the family about how they are supporting their child's AAC at time. Are they having any challenges, and what are the successes? So I also have created a mini version of the AAC roles chart for families. And this is just something simple for, things like who's going to make sure it's on the charger. And typically in a family, you have maybe 1 to 3 individuals, but it's more of instead of a roles chart, it's more of a kind of a reminder just of, how to make sure the device is ready. It's charged. This is always a good one because then I typically can talk to the parents about, that checklist of, hey, make sure it's put on the charger when your kiddo goes to bed. So we want to make sure that our team is working with a team and working with all of the team members. And that's why I think it's so important to include parents in this as well. So I recently asked some of my fellow SLPs, SLPAs, and educators what were some of the biggest challenges that they faced with AAC. Getting their team on board was consistently one of the biggest issues. And I'm going to admit that I've had the same issues. I have walked in to do therapy at 2 p.m. only to find the student's voice was still in their backpack or not charged. This is why I created this chart for my team. This chart is simple, doesn't take much time. What it does is it gives responsibility to the team and not just you or one person, because yes, I have been thrown under the proverbial bus as to why a student's device wasn't readily accessible, even though I was really only in the room twice a week for 30 minutes. But this is an important step in guiding your AAC team to think and work well as a team. So the next tool I'm going to talk about is the AAC implementation plan. So this is another tool that I wish I had started using much earlier. So why did I start using an AAC implementation plan? So I had a student that came to our district about 4 or 5 years ago. She had an eye gaze device, and many of my team members, were overwhelmed. I will admit I was at first. Eye gaze devices are typically expensive and they can look intimidating. But guess what? They're really no different than an iPad. They just have more bells and whistles, and instead of touching the screen, the individual uses their eyes. And I realized that using an AAC implementation plan, using the AAC chores chart, actually kind of took away some of that intimidation of the eye gaze. It actually, kind of reminded them of, hey, these are some activities and things you can do. Yes, this is an expensive machine. We want to be careful. We don't want to drop it, spill water on it, those types of things. But really, it's no different than the other programs we're using, because really what it is we're supporting an individual's communication. It just looks different. So, and one of the things I noticed with this individual is that, and with this team, is they really wanted to know how to support the student, but they were overwhelmed with the device and honestly didn't know where to begin. So my AC team wanted to know what to do, when to do it, how often to do it, and why. They wanted to know how to use that device, and they wanted to know, the who, what, when, where, whys of the device. And that's really what an AAC implementation plan is going to provide for your team. So I had come in and talked about activities to do and modeling for a variety of daily activities, but I realized they needed something a bit more robust to support and encourage them. So I had learned about using an AAC implementation plan during a 4-day AAC evaluation training I participated in with the Southern California Diagnostic Center. We practiced creating them to go along with evaluations. So I took this back to my team. I started off with a very simple AAC implementation plan. and I have updated it a few times since then. I also created a couple different versions depending on who is using them and where. The setup and information in the implementation plans are very similar, but the data collection is what really varies. What was amazing was how this helped everyone support the individual better. I truly believe that our team members really wanted to support AAC, but I mean, it can seem overwhelming, and many aren't sure really what to do when all those WH questions. The AAC implementation plan helps with this. It gives the team a guide so they can support their AAC user. So one of the best ways to create your plan is to work with other team members. I try to do this as much as possible. And this could be in person, this could be on a Zoom call, this could be through emails. So then when you have created a plan, make sure the individuals who are going to be implementing the plan understand how it works. Model some modeling and ask guided questions and look for feedback. The more your team is involved, the more they will be invested in the outcomes. So these next two slides, I will show you two different examples of some AAC implementation plans. I actually have a few more because I love creating data collection forms. We all have our things. The first is much more robust and is something I typically use or the campus SLP uses for data. The second one includes the same information, but a slightly different format and isn't focused on data in the same way. So you can see that this first one has the who, what, when, where, why questions, and it also has a couple locations for data as well as notes. And then when you look at the second one, it's really has the same types of questions. It's getting the same information, but whereas the first one has more locations and opportunities for data collection, this one is just a little bit more general. We still want to offer the ability to take notes and take some data on what's happening, but really just depends on who's using it as to kind of which forum that I might use. So when you're creating the implementation plan, I want you to start with a list of activities. This could be 5, or it could be 10, it could be, however many activities. I typically start with 5 because I don't want to overwhelm my team. I also want my team to know that we are not going to be doing this, and the expectation is not to do this type of activity for every single activity that an individual is going to use their device or their system for across the day. So you're going to think of various activities during the day. I try to choose a variety across different times, settings, individuals. Now you're going to fill in the following information. So first, you're going to define what the activity is. So for example, if I'm using a book, if you take a mouse to school, which is a fun activity, is something I'm prepping some activities for because getting closer to that back to school, unfortunately. The second thing is, why are we doing this? And really what this is what is the goal or objective in the activity? It could be because it's a preferred book and you want to work on simply modeling without any expectations, or it could be that you're working on answering fill in the blank questions with different vocabulary. So that's what the goal or objective, the why is. The who is responsible is typically pretty self-explanatory. Where and when does this take place? Is this in the therapy room, a general education classroom, etc.? And also, what time of the day or block is that in? And it could be something that's across the day, and it could also be something that's across settings. So if that's the case, you're going to put across settings and throughout the day. Then I write some of the target words. I like to mix up core as well as fringe words. So for example, I pull in subjects, verbs, objects, prepositions that I might be able to model while we're looking at the book together. So an important part of using an implementation plan is to meet with staff to go over the plan, make sure that they understand the activity and check to see if the staff has any questions. This is a great time to ask the staff to make notes on what works, what doesn't work within the activities. And just think of all the amazing data you're going to be getting with these. But shh, don't tell anybody, because the second we say we're taking data, I don't know what happens sometimes, but the great thing is we're getting such great information when we put these together and when we get the feedback from our team. So I always plan to check back in with the team members. So I do not do this for every activity. I start with a few activities per day or block of time. We don't want to overwhelm the team as they are getting used to a new tool. I know you're going to be shocked to hear this, but you will want to model and teach the team members how to use the plan. Once again, we model our modeling and our plan. Don't forget to ask team members for feedback. Consistently, I have parents who ask, what can I do at home? But we know, those of us who parents have kids, that parents are really busy. And just like us, they may be at different points in their training and understanding of how to support their AAC user. So I try to touch base with parents, caregivers, family members, and share some examples of the school AAC implementation plan. This is a great way to share some of the things that we're working on at school and give them ideas for things that they can do at home. I also created a home AAC implementation plan. This is a simplified version, and it's really to get the parent, the caregiver thinking about how they can support and do activities. So I talk about the ideas and offer support to family using a plan at home. And so this is an example of a home AAC plan. And you can see it's very simple, and it's, I think, easy to do, easy to fill out. And, when I use this with a family, I just encourage them and kind of talk about the same things that I do with my team is, hey, this is not something I want you to think about doing for every single activity. I want you to pick maybe 2 for after school, maybe 3, or, maybe it's just 1, start with 1. But when we start using an AAC implementation plan, it gets people to start thinking about the activities they can do and how they can modify them and how they can model, how they can support the individual. So the home AAC implementation, like I said, targets the same question as a school base, but it's just a different format. We start with what are the targets, the type of activity, where is it going to take place, such as at home or at the park, who's going to be supporting this. So AAC user, and then I typically write down, how we're going to do this. What are things going to look like? So how are we supporting the AAC user, which is what I write down in that how section. What is that going to look like? So for a home activity, it might look like the activity is going to the grocery store. Some of the targets are go, car, in car, out of car, cart, push cart, choose. You can also have items on the grocery list. This is a great way to practice finding things in vocabulary and modeling different things in different folders. Such a great activity. Where is this located? Car, grocery store, and then who? Typically that's, the caregiver. Maybe you have one of the siblings involved, and maybe the sibling is working on some of these things and modeling with their sibling while they're at the grocery store. So I've stressed to my team that an assessment plan, an implementation plan, whether for school or home, does not need to be an encyclopedia. Oh, wait, some of y'all might not know what that is. It means it doesn't have to be long, detailed, or fancy. The idea is to get all of our team, whether it's with a implementation plan at school, implementation plan at home. The idea is to get our entire team thinking about the activities they're doing and how they can model them. So AAC intervention needs the team. The success depends on the team. And let's not forget the AAC team is not just the SLP or the AAC specialist or just the special education teacher. The AAC team includes the AAC user, teachers, instructional assistants, special teachers, parents, caregivers, friends, siblings, and more. So by using a AAC implementation chart, a roles chart, we can really work to bring the team together to communicate and support the team. So you have your roles chart and implementation plan ready to go. Now it's time for some implementation. So if you were in my session yesterday, I talked about modeling and prompting. And in this session, talked a lot about modeling and modeling. This is one of those things that I think I include in pretty much every training that I do on AAC, because I think this is so critical for supporting our AAC user. So aided language stimulation or modeling helps to set the stage for AAC intervention, but we can use prompting hierarchies, and they're kind of like the lights and directions as we guide and support AAC implementation. So I want to kind of show these two charts that I have, and you'll see that one is a kind of the most prompting to the least amount of prompting, and the other does the least to the most. I want to go over this one real quickly with you guys and kind of talk about how we can use the prompting and cueing to support the individuals. And when you think about it, our roles chart and our AAC implementation plan are really like using prompting and cueing for ourselves and how we can support the individual. So when we are working with a student or a child, we want to encourage the individual by using modeling, by using techniques that support the intervention and support the individual. And I like to use kind of the terminology of kind of airless teaching or airless learning. We want to support the individual. I'll admit, when I first started as an SLP, I was like, what? But that'd be giving them the answer. And then someone was like, yes, because they don't know the answer. They don't know how to find the answer. So our goal and our role is to teach them how to find the answer. So with an AAC device, you know, we give this to an individual and they may have never seen something like this. Now they might have played, you know, Angry Birds on their phone or who, you know, and I find a lot of times my kiddos are really good and they can do stuff in games that I absolutely can't do. But, you know, an AAC device or a program, no matter whether it's low tech or high tech, is something new. So we are going to be modeling and teaching and giving instruction on what that looks like. So if we start with the most amount of supports, that would be what's called physical assistance. Now, in the past, we used hand over hand to guide AAC users. We have learned that this is not supportive of our AAC users and creates a reliance on those hand over hand prompting. So it also takes away the individual's personal control. So I do not use hand over hand. I will admit this is something that I was taught used in the past, but I don't do that anymore. I will occasionally use physical assistance, but what I might do is I might do like a touch or a nudge, but I'm very, very cautious about using that because there's so many other tools that you can use, prompting and modeling, to support the individual. So physical assistance is something that I really use rarely, but it is something that you can think about, but just really think about what other prompting and cueing you can use before that. Right below that is modeling. And I can't emphasize enough what a powerful tool modeling is for supporting AAC. Modeling is about demonstrating how to choose a message on a device. It's we're performing the action that we want the AAC user to learn and to add to their communication. But honestly, this is very much like we do for most of our learning. It's, how did we learn English? How do we learn a new language? Someone's going to model. When I started to take Spanish, I could read a Spanish word, but I had no idea how to pronounce it until someone modeled that to me. They modeled and showed me how. And so this modeling is probably one of the most important tools that you can use in that direct, when you're working with the individual and showing them how to use this AAC device is, modeling. Then we have visuals and gestures. This could be something such as pointing to a button or general location of the vocabulary. So you're essentially showing the individual the button to push or where it is located. It's like modeling, but pulling back from pushing the actual button. So you might go through what you're saying, but instead of pushing the button, you're showing the individual where they can push the button on their own. Then we have verbalizations. This can be direct or indirect. We might give a verbal cue for the vocabulary user to choose that word. And then one of the most important components of prompting and modeling for our AAC user is the pause. Now that's hard. I felt uncomfortable doing the pause. And I know that some of you probably feel the same way. It is really hard to pause. I had to teach myself how to do that. I literally used to count my fingers. I used to put my hand under the table and I used to count to 10. Now I've gotten to the point where I can just do it in my head. But I still have to remind myself that we want to pause. I can't emphasize enough that we need to give the individual the time to process what we're asking or to process what they want to say and give them the time to respond, give them the time to use their voice. So I understand we want to rush in to help them, but if we rush in too soon, we aren't giving them the opportunity to process and communicate with us. So pause. It's good. Now, don't be afraid. Once you know the individual, don't be afraid to, come in and model the response or support them by using visual gestures or verbalizing. But we want to remember to give the individual time by pausing. So why do we model? It is such an effective tool. And you might not realize this, but you model already. You use this with your students, clients, significant others, kids, animals. It is a tool where we show the individual the target or expectation that we desire. And this really encompasses pretty much all aspects of our lives. So to support my team, I model for them. I show them how I model. I model how they can model. I make sure that they have the opportunity to practice on a device or printables. I schedule modeling and training sessions. What I love to do is I love to go into a session or just go into the classroom where maybe the instructional assistant or the teacher is working with the individual. And I might just, hey, can I join the group? And then I just model how I would model. So think of this as using the device along with the words you say. Sometimes I'm modeling one word or sometimes I'm using multiple words. I typically am not doing word for word when I'm modeling, but I want to use as many words as possible in that phrase or sentence to model for the individual. But the reason why I comment on, not necessarily do I always use word for word is I find that sometimes people are hesitant in their modeling because they're like, well, I can't possibly find all those words and do that whole sentence. And so they don't model at all. So I'm like, just model one word. If nothing else, model single word. I try to model a couple words in the sentences, but if nothing else, just model one word. So just like our team members need time to get used to an AAC system, they also need time to get used to modeling. You can do this with direct instruction and modeling. Give them time to practice on a device or on printouts of the device. It's important to model mess ups and searching. So the reality is learning to use a device isn't neither is verbal speech. How often do you make a mistake? Just did, and what you want to say or intend to say. To model, so model making mistakes and model showing moving on or fixing the error. Model finding vocabulary. I include some examples of modeling depending on time. I have some modeling, some examples that I want to show you. So remember, modeling on a device takes practice. Individuals need the time to spend with a device, and it's okay to pause and look for a symbol. You can use that opportunity to show how to find a symbol. So powerful to give the AAC user the tools to do that, the tools to find something. So I have a couple examples of some modeling, and then I'm going to just do one or two, and then I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions that I might answer for you guys. It does look like a baby animal. Yeah, it does. Those are
Baby animal.
baby.
Tadpole.
That's right. The tadpole is a baby animal. It's a baby frog.
Sea anemone. Sea urchin.
Those are lots of great
Sea anemone. Sea urchin.
a sea urchin and a sea animal. Let's go back to our ocean where we see,
Sea urchin.
yes, those are animals that live in the ocean. Awesome. So I wanted to show you this activity because now it's hard. I had to cover up the screen to show some of the modeling, and there was actually the caregiver was doing some modeling on their side. But I always like to show this video because it shows that you can work with AAC via teletherapy. You can work with a student using an eye gaze during teletherapy. It's about kind of setting up. This is a good example of having an AAC implementation plan in place for some of our therapy sessions that helps the caregiver know what we're doing so that they can support the individual on their side as well. But the reason I like to show this is we were doing an activity and the individual, the kiddo, was repeatedly saying baby animal over. And, could it be that the student was just dwelling on baby animal? Absolutely. But I wanted to model to the family member and to the kiddo that, that I'm using what she's saying. Like I wanted to model to the family how we can allow a student to explore and play on their device. And maybe she did want to talk about baby animals. I'm not sure, but I was assuming that we had been talking about baby animals and she wanted to talk some more about that. So I was modeling to the family what an important tool that can be of respecting what the individual is saying and doing on their device, and modeling using that those comments and the statements, what the individual wants to share, by going back to the activity we're doing and pulling in some of that information so I could show her, yes, oh yeah, there's baby animals. We were talking about baby animals. We were talking about all these sea animals. So I was modeling for the caregiver how I am respecting what the individual is saying and doing, and just giving them some ideas of how they can do that at home. So I'm going to kind of skip through some of these because I think we're running out of time, and I want to definitely leave some time for some questions. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, please feel free to send an email. Also, you can use a bit.ly link. And then if you'd like to, you can sign up for my newsletter and get some access to some of the blog posts and some free activities and training that I have for AAC. Or you can text, this is a new thing, you can text AAC to 33777. So I just want to check and see if there are any questions that I might answer.
Shannon, there have been some questions. Let me pull them back up and we can see them to you. So just a second.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll give me a chance to take a drink of water.
Shannon, one of the questions you talked earlier about responsibility for the device. So one of the questions was kind of like, at what age does the AAC user become responsible for their device, taking it out of the bag, putting it in the bag, charging it at home, those kinds of things?
You know, I think that is a fantastic question. And I think it really depends on the individual. So one of the things that I've done is with that AAC roles chart is if it's a younger student, I will have the individual be a part of that, but I might have an adult that is responsible to make sure that that is happening. So kind of a combination. And then as a student gets, or a child gets a little bit older, and you know, that could be something where it goes from somebody's modeling, taking it out, getting it ready, to, you know, just giving a reminder, to the expectation that that is the individual's responsibility. So, and that's a situation where you can actually take, you know, a roles chart, and, you know, it wouldn't be necessarily a roles chart, but making kind of a list for the individual as a reminder. Oh, did I get it out of the, make sure I get it out of the backpack, make sure I put it on the charger, you know, making sure I'm asking for help if, you know, something's going on. So it's a good segue of, we may start with the roles are more adult based, and then we transition to adult based, you know, with modeling. So we're essentially modeling, and then we slowly but surely pull back that support so that the individual is responsible, because in the end, we want the individual to take on those roles and responsibilities. I just found on my campuses that we were really having difficulty with some of these components. And so I wanted to get us started with, okay, we need somebody in charge of these things, and then slowly but surely pulling back those so that the individual themselves is responsible. But that's an awesome question. Thank you.
Okay, the next one, in your chart, you talked about responsibilities and having and making sure things are available. So one of them is, what about like low tech options if the student's high tech is not working? So like the chart includes, there's going to be something else available that's low tech, like a couple of sheets or something of that nature.
That's absolutely. I think that, so what I typically do is I will have, the teams will print out a printable. I like to have one in the gen ed classroom, special ed classroom, or like say the specials, so that the other individuals, so you can do kind of modeling with two devices, but also so that you have a backup. So yes, absolutely. Having those, the backups is key. a printable backup.
Okay, one of the other questions was, what kind of activities do you advise when maybe people are using the tracking sheet for that you mentioned using in a classroom, like they're going to go do an activity, so you want them to track how often the student is using their device and things of that nature. So do you have a dozen activities?
So I guess I would say is, what wouldn't you use? And though I'm, answering a question with a question, but so I'll give you an example of some different activities. So for a preschooler, we have a kiddo that one of the most powerful times for modeling has been in their little circle or group time. That is when this kiddo loves using the device. But what I was finding was that it wasn't always there, or there wasn't somebody who was kind of supporting or coming in and modeling. And so what we did was we used the implementation chart, and we actually, there was like 3 different kind of activities within circle time. So one was the alphabet song. The other was the book for that day. So or for the week. So sometimes this preschool, they would have themes for the week. So we would actually, in the implementation plan for that morning, for that activity, we did the letter song, and we had certain letters that we might target. Like this kiddo would follow through and he would do the letters, but then we would also target some of the letters have vocabulary. So we would target that. So let's see, if it were in a classroom, say it's in a classroom and they're talking about weather, that would be a perfect time to model weather words, to work on locations of weather words. The hard thing about that is that, honestly, I think I do this with pretty much every activity. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that every activity is cataloged or logged, but I do the same type of thing, or try to, for a variety. So if I have an older student and maybe they're in their science and they're talking about weather, that's when I might model, what is the weather, how to find the weather words, what's the weather outside. And sometimes that requires a little bit more connection with, if you're in a general ed setting with that general education teacher, what are the targets? What are the things they're going to be talking about? In a speech therapy room, I use the same activities that I use for any of my kiddos that I'm working on building language. So that could be Candyland. If I'm playing Candyland, it could be that we're targeting my turn, your turn, different colors. We're targeting go, move. If it is, like any sort of, game, picking some of those targets that I can use on the device. Books are fantastic to use. So kind of in a small based therapy setting, I use a lot of my typical everyday speech and language activities. Now, I do have some activities that are more specific. I do some videos and things to work when I'm working on longer utterances, but honestly, whether it's a book, it's a circle time, it's science class, and you're talking about the weather, it's going to PE or going in between classes, and you want to target some vocabulary as you're traveling, you can set that up. I'm actually right now creating a spreadsheet that I'm sharing with some of my newsletter people, where we're putting together activities and kind of setting them up so that it can easily be put into an implementation plan, because I truly believe that you can do this with just about every activity, and we really should be. But like I said, you're not going to do this. You're not going to have 100 activities on that implementation plan for the day, because that's just exhausting. The idea really behind the implementation plan is to change the way we're thinking about and looking at activities. Because once you start thinking about, okay, so in math class, we're going to work on numbers. And so you go through that chart and you think about, okay, what are the targets? What is the activity? Where is it located? What are the goals? You start thinking about that, then it becomes something more second nature where you're like, okay, yeah, we're going to lunch. Now, I think going to lunch and food time is probably one of the simplest times to work and easiest to put into an implementation plan. But the idea really behind using this is really to get people thinking about how you can do this with every single activity. So, I hope I've given you a few activities, but honestly, I think it's more about, I would say about the only time that activities that I might not do or use, I sit here and try to think about if I was in a swimming pool, but wow, if I'm at the swimming pool, I just make sure that the device is actually in waterproof, and it's a great time to work on location in the pool, out of the pool, jump, swim. So really the awesome thing is we can use this for everything.
Okay, I think that might have answered the person who posted that question. Then asked was saying they were looking a little bit more for activities at home for parents, but it sounds like you're saying, look, whatever it is you're doing, use that as your activity at home and use that with the speech device. But they also asked about how much are families involved in planning how AAC is used at home.
So, I really try to encourage, and I try to get my teams to work together. So I work in the school system and I also work private practice. So I'm also in this unique situation that I work with all individuals. That is one of the reasons why I really try to take the implementation plan that we're doing at school and work and show the parents at home what we're doing, so that then they can think about ideas and things of what they can do at home. So for example, if I was at home and I was going to the grocery store, what a fantastic time to work on some language, to work on different activities. So many different language activities you can do in a simple activity of going to the grocery store, unloading the dishwasher, modeling, put the plate up, go. So I really, really encourage our teams to work together. I really look at it as it's not the school team or the home team, because really the team is about the AAC user. So I really encourage teams to make sure that we're talking and we're communicating, and that what is working at home, we try to emulate that at school. What's working at school, we try to emulate that at home. So really, because we want our individuals to be able to use their device at home, at school, at the park, everywhere. And we can't do that unless we kind of communicate and work more as a team.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we are just out of time. We want to thank Shannon for her time today and the information that was presented to everyone. If you have questions, different ways of communicating were presented there. So we want to thank our presenter for their time today and encourage everyone to check out some of the other sessions that are still available.
Bye. Take care.